My name's Del Stevens. Some of you know me as the Tuna Dog, and we're going to talk today about albacore. We're also going to talk a little bit about bluefin. And I'll cover a little bit on that. You're probably going to start seeing more bluefin, and I'll explain why when we get to that as well. But I've been fishing albacore for quite a few years now, and I normally buy a new boat every couple of years, but this one's been such a great boat that it's been hard to want to go buy another boat. This boat's 34 feet long, triple 300 Verados on it, made by Hydrosport, which is now HCB, and but I can haul probably 100 tuna on that thing. It's got a 575 quart coffin box in front of the console, and then it's got two fish boxes ahead of that hold almost 300 quarts as well. But so we've had, I think, 54 on one stop in that boat, and we had to stop because we ran out of ice. We still had space, and that was in October when they were a lot bigger. So, but great boat. I've ran that boat 30 knots in 8-foot seas, quartering them, and the only thing you had to do was feather it so you didn't go airborne. But which that happens every now and then too. But these are some of my sponsors. I ran charter for over 25 years, had some sponsors back then, but it seems like I have more sponsors now than I did then. That's because I was doing about 30 to 40 tuna seminars every year before pandemic, and now I only do about 10 or 15. But I'm also doing more bigger events as well. So, but albacore, they migrate across, and they come across from Japan, typically somewhere in the Bay Area or north of the Bay Area a little bit, and they come up in a counterclockwise rotation. Okay, Southern California has a clockwise rotation of albacore, and those fish never come up here. They're in a totally different migration. A lot of times you hear the guys in Southern California, oh, the tuna are in, and it's like, that has no bearing on our tuna at all, because those aren't going to come up here. So we have a totally different migration. So the guys in Northern California, when they start getting them, then we can start looking at, as the water warms and the tuna highway forms, they'll start coming up here. Big eye and small bluefin typically travel with them, but as I said, the bigger bluefin are starting to come across more. A little bit about the bluefin tuna and why I'm saying this is, in 2009, our bluefin tuna population was at its lowest that it has been in 75 years. The Mexicans were taking a lot of them, and the Japanese were taking a lot of them, but the Japanese were taking them when they were small. Bluefin tuna spawn, Pacific bluefin tuna spawn real close to Japan. And they typically don't come across until they're 1 to 2 years old. Well, the Japanese seine fleet was getting most of them. And so we just never, that just killed our bluefin tuna fishery. In 2016, the United States, Mexico, Taiwan, South Korea, and Japan all signed a treaty to change practices and be more proactive in managing these tunas, and that's why you've seen in the late 2000s, teens, that the bluefin started being caught a lot more in Southern California, and in the last 3 or 4 years. And it's probably going to get better for them as well. We're starting to see those fish also come across and start coming up. I did a seminar down in Eureka, California in late March. They had already caught one in mid-March off the Bay Area. So bluefin don't care about water temperature. They're, of all the tuna species, it doesn't matter to them. When we were back one year fishing bluefin, Atlantic bluefin, out of Oregon Inlet and the Outer Banks, we were in 18 feet of water one morning. It was 49 degrees, and we were pitching poppers to them. 3 hours later, we were in the Gulf Stream at 72 degrees and 6,000 feet of water, chunking them. So, and I'll talk more about that as we go. Our albacore typically are immature. They're 3 to 4 year old fish. Average weight's probably 25 pounds. Mid-season, early season, they'll be 15 to 20. And in late September into October, they'll be pushing 40 pounds. It's not uncommon for someone to get a 40 pounder every once in a while. Mature albacore typically 75 to 100 pounds. We never see the mature ones because once they're about 5 years old, they don't come across. They migrate down to the South Pacific, and that's where they spawn and stay. So they don't have a bladder. They're constantly swimming. They'll coast down and they'll swim up. They've tagged them and documented that albacore will travel down and up 24 times in a 24-hour period. Okay? They know that from tagging them. So a lot of times if you lose your bite, hang around. They might be back in a little bit. And a lot of times that happens. They're feeding machines. You get them in a feeding frenzy, they'll eat 20-25% of their body weight in a day when you get them really wide open. Hey, Ray, Stephen. Oregon, 25 fish per person limit. Most boats can't hold that many fish, so we typically don't worry about that. Washington, there's no limit, but no limit on the number of rods that you can fish. So you just need to fish the number of rods that you can handle. So when I had my 26 striper, we fished one day and we had the outriggers out, and we had 4 people on board, and I think we had 10 rods out. And a bunch of them all went off, and the wind was blowing a little bit. We were dead in the water, and it drifted sideways, and we needed to have a person on the helm. We didn't. We tangled everything up, between all those rods out, and it's like, all right, we can't put that many rods out. So, but food is the key to finding albacore. Used to kind of think that it was water temp, but water temp's kind of secondary. It's food. You're still looking for water temperature of 58 to 62 degrees, but it's not uncommon for albacore to acclimate to colder water. And after they've been here a little while, they'll move around for the food. They'll move into colder water. I've seen them in 56 and 57 degree water. We've caught them in 57 degree water. And you're typically looking for upwellings or temperature breaks. The ocean's very much like a steelhead stream in the fact that there's certain places that you catch steelhead, they'll be in the tail outs. Well, the ocean's the same way. You've got canyons out there, seamounts out there. The currents will push up against those seamounts and it'll trap those bait fish. And the current's strong enough that the bait fish can't swim out of that, and the predators like the tuna will congregate in those areas. That's why when you're out there fishing, a lot of times if you mark the spot, you go back after a few years, you'll notice that, well, I got a lot of spots in certain areas. So there are certain areas that hold and produce fish. And if you didn't have anywhere to go and you knew where an area was productive, you know, if the cloud cover was too thick to get chlorophyll or temperature shots, go back to where you've caught fish. So you're running out there on the ocean, looking for birds, working the water. It's not uncommon for the birds to be sitting on the water and they've already fed because the albacore fed and the birds ate the scraps. Now the albacore went down and the birds are just sitting there. You don't want to go, you want to check it out. You don't want to discount that. So especially if you're already in warm enough water that they could be there, and clean water. You know, it could be green water, but preferably clean green water, okay? You might be just on the just close to the transition area of it going from green to blue and not know it. So as long as it's clean green water, decent water temperature, later in the season, if the water temp's a little cooler, I'd still check it out. So obviously in August, a lot of times the water warms up above 63 degrees, they'll start jumping, and when you see a jumper, that's obviously a good sign you found fish. Finding fish is probably 90% of catching albacore. And then the blue water, green water breaks. Periodically we'll see those breaks. You know, it's like somebody drew a line in the ocean out there and went from green to blue, and obviously that's a good spot to start and work that back and forth between the two. Albacore love fresh, clean, blue water, but they like to eat. And there's more food in the green water than there is in the blue water, and so they'll work back and forth in between them. And so working that line back and forth is a good thing to do. But traveling packs, East Coast guys, they talk on the radio a lot and helping each other out. And out here we talk in code. You know, I'm 5 clicks from where I told you I was going to be, and you know, and that's partly because albacore fishermen out here are still young at the fishery and new, and don't really follow a etiquette. You get a call on the radio that I got this hot bite going over here, and I'm at this location, and it might be 10 miles away, and 25 boats will be there in 30 minutes. And in 35 minutes, the bite will be dead, because all that boat traffic will drive them down. And then it's all over with for everybody. So help each other out, you know where your buddy's at. A lot of times with, you know, your AIS, you can see your buddies and that kind of thing. So make sure you're in an area that has fish. We talked about marking those spots on your chart plotters. Are you in an area known for holding and catching fish? Are there any reliable reports? Reliable is the key phrase there, okay? We fished a trip one time where I had a buddy that he had a few guys that wanted to fish. He said, "Dang, the bite's been really good right here." And there was a bite where he was saying. And so we ran to that on a Saturday. Well, everybody else knew about that bite too, because everybody else was there. There was a lot of boats there. We trolled around, changing different directions, changing lures, speeds. I mean, you name it, we did it for a couple hours, and finally it's like, and everybody's on the radio. When they're all on the radio, they're not catching fish. Because if you're catching fish, you don't have time to be on the radio. And I said, pull the gear. And we ran 20 miles south to an area I'd been about 4 days earlier. There was not a boat in sight. Put the gear out, didn't go 30 yards to start hooking up. And we stayed there. Went back and forth, about a quarter-mile strip, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And we wound up with about 23 fish, but we still wound up catching more than most of the boats that day. A boat come by us in the afternoon. "Hey, Dal, how you doing?" "Oh, pretty good." It's like, "How you guys doing?" "Oh, we're doing great." It's like, oh man, it's like, geez. You know, I'm thinking, man, we're not doing so well. You know, great is a relative phrase. They ended up the day with 6 fish. So, but don't chase the radio fish. Fish your style. So look for the bird. Are there any birds? Are there any jumpers? Have you seen a temperature break? If there's no sea life where you're at, not a bird, not a Tweety bird, nothing, there's probably not tuna there either. Because where there's tuna, they leave scraps. And those birds will feed on those scraps. So if you don't see anything out there, I mean, if it's desolate, there's probably not tuna there. Okay? Think about that. They're highly migratory, so they do move through. Did you check the sea surface and chlorophyll charts before you came out? Okay. You should subscribe to one of the services. There's a bunch of them out there. RIP charts and Terrafin. But is there a lot of boats? I had a buddy coming down from Eugene one time with his boys, and he was late. It was on a Saturday, and we didn't leave dock till 8 o'clock. And there was a hot report. And so we ran to this spot and get out there, and oh man, there's a lot of boats. It's like, we get to the outside edge of it and kill the power, start working the iron, start hooking them. We had like 3 or 4 fish on, pulling them up. A boat comes driving by us from me to that first rack. We were that close. We landed those fish, lost our bite. Dropped the iron back down, hooked them back up again, brought them back up, you know, and pretty soon another boat went by. You know, it's like, oh my gosh, you know. But the boats trolling around, we're not catching fish. We were chumming and working the iron and trying to work live bait as well, but we'd get them up, and there'd be a few come up with them and get 1 or 2 on live bait, and down they'd go, you know, when the boats come back by. And there was a boat that had been at the bait station with us that finally showed up out there, and they were trolling around us. If they'd have just gotten our chum trail and drifted with us, they probably would have caught fish. You know, because we were chumming enough and had the fish going enough. We got done. I think we had like 45 fish, and there was only like 4 or 5 boats out there that knew how to work iron, and they were the only boats that were catching any fish. Eventually, the boats left, and we'd already left, but it was interesting. But sea surface temperature charts are important. This is from August off the Columbia River, El Waco over here, the Columbia River's right here, Astoria Canyon right there. You can see the water temperature, 60 degrees right here, 63 or 61, 62, 63, 64. So when you're looking at this, this tells me a couple of things, okay? First, I can see that there's a pretty good break right in here. And there's also one right in here, okay? Well, this area is known for catching fish. This is the 46 line north, that's 10. Typically from 46 to 4610, that area is pretty fishy, especially from about 124.40 out to the 125 line. This whole area is real fishy. Well, that's just right on that 30-35 line west, okay? And the water temp in there is about 60, it's going from 60 to 61, 62 degrees. Not a bad spot, okay? So if we compare that to the chlorophyll chart, well, the chlorophyll, you can see, and this is the green water and this is blue water. Well, it's pretty close to that. And you really want that green water, blue water chlorophyll chart to be pretty close to where the temperature breaks are as well. Now, I told you this tells me two things, okay? Out in here, if I have to fish out in here, look what this is 64, 65, 66 degrees. Anything above 63 degrees is not a trolling show. They're going to be jumping, but it's going to be tough to get very many fish trolling. You might catch them trolling swim baits, trolling a diving lure, but this is more of an iron show. And that it tells me from just looking at this, if I have to go out in there to get fish, I'm going to be working iron to get them, okay? Because they're going to be down in a thermocline. The water temperature is so warm, they'll be down in the thermocline. They'll be anywhere from 40 to 70 feet down in that little bit cooler water, okay? Albacore love 58 to 62 degrees. They'll tolerate the warmer water when they come up to feed and go back down, but typically they'll stay down in that thermocline. And I told you that they go up and they come down. They've tagged them 24 hours in a 24 times in a 24-hour period, okay? Oop, back up, yeah. So this is a sea surface temperature chart on Sirius XM on weather, okay? And Sirius XM weather, I think, is about $100 a year to have the weather. And you can see that spot right there. I just touched my screen right there, and it put that. Normally, if you touch that, it'll also put the water temperature number right there as well, and it'll give you the coordinates of that spot right up here in the corner, and you can see that. But the temperature goes away first, and then that little steering wheel looking thing goes away as well. You can see the crumb trails where I'd been fishing earlier, and but the water temp had moved out just a little bit. Now, if you leave this on all day, this will update during the day. It'll be amazing watching this shift and change and shift and move around. And I had my boat on simulator, and it was at one of the England Marine events I was doing quite a few years ago, and I had weather on, temperature, and I left that on all day, and it was amazing how much that changed during the day. It changes it updates every 3 hours on temperature. It also, the weather will also give you the sea state out there. So you've got the swells, the duration, and if they're close together up in here, typically the duration's a lot shorter. If they get farther apart out here, farther between, preferably. And then, I don't have the, you can also put the wind on, and it'll tell you what the wind is too, and from what direction. So you get all that with Sirius XM weather, okay? That's about $100 a year, okay? The latest thing is fish mapping by Sirius XM. And it's a number of things. There's there's a number of features to it. I use 3. I use the temperature, front strength, and in their case, they're calling it plankton concentration or front strength. And then I also use the surface height anomalies. What is surface height anomalies? Upwellings, downwellings, yeah. Okay. It's interesting how much the ocean can move up and down. Out on the East Coast, off of out in the Baltimore area, the ocean can be up 24 inches out there, and it's amazing. And partly because of how strong the Gulf Stream currents are pushing against it. So, but fishing recommendations is on there. I turn those off. We don't. The only one we have is tuna, and they still don't have all the areas of tuna for ours out here yet. So I've been helping them with that and giving them coordinates of locations. But sea surface temperature contours, plankton concentration contours, weed lines. If you're fishing the East Coast, it'll show you the weed lines. So sea surface temperature, front strength, plankton front strength, sea surface height anomalies, and then 30-meter subsurface sea temperatures. And they're not measuring it, it's an algorithm, and they're calculating it. Okay? This whole fish mapping service is produced by SiriusXM, but all they're doing is they're taking what the commercial guys are using in that service and converting it to a sport fishing application and charging you about $100 a month for it. Okay? And you can turn it off for 6 months out of the year. Turn it on, turn it off. But I also have a flyer for 1 month free, and there's a $300 rebate on equipment because you'll probably have to change or add a antenna for it. And that antenna is $800. For Garmin, I don't know what it is for Raymarine or Semrad or any of the others, but the service, most everybody now has it. So Ferrino, Semrad, Raymarine, they all have it, but in most cases, you'll have to buy an antenna for it to work. But here's the fishing recommendations. They've got it turned on here, shows what species it is, and then areas where they're at. Sea height anomalies. This is where I was talking about on the East Coast. See all those contours, and it was like 19 inches right in here. So, but this is off my chart, off of the Oregon coast, up by Owako, coming out of there, headed on, and so you can't see any of the fish recommendations because we don't have any of those species of fish other than tuna. So no reason for those to be on. So I turn them off. And it's hard to see here, but there's the temperature front strength is going to be in red. The plankton and chlorophyll, that'll be in green. Sea height anomaly, that'll be in orange. Okay. And typically what you're looking for, temperature front strength, is measured in a scale of 1 to 4. 4 being the strongest. Same with the plankton front strength, and same with the sea height anomalies. And if you find a spot where all those are coming together, touch the screen, it'll say right there, strong. Okay, those are all coming pretty close together right there. Touch the screen, it's just strong chance of catching fish there. So, but fairly accurate. If you have the service, you can also get an app and put it on your phone. It doesn't cost you anything to put it on your phone as long as you have the service, and so you can pull it up. But this is my chart from a few years ago. This was a wide open bite and we had stopped, so I took a picture of the screen. But it was showing the bottom at 30 feet. They were so thick. And you know, with tuna, you rarely ever see an arch. And it's partly because they're moving so fast. They're more of a streak on there as they are in this. These are all tuna. So typically when you're running, you leave the port, your chart's probably on auto on the sonar. You get out into that deep water, take your sonar, put it on manual, put it like 100 feet. That way it's only looking 100 feet, the signal's much stronger, the picture's a lot better, okay? If you have chirp, put it on high chirp, because if you're only looking shallow, you'll get a better picture if you have high chirp, okay? Medium chirp, low chirp, those will all show it as well. This was low chirp before I really got that dialed in. This picture's pretty old from a number of years ago, but they'll all show it. If you have 2,000 or 2 kW or 3 kW transducer, it probably won't matter what you're on, low, high, or medium, because power is everything when it comes to sonar. So more power, a way better picture. This is Panoptics. I had one of the first versions of it when they came out. They wanted to put it on my boat. They owed me some money. It's like, I don't know if I want that on my boat. And but I found it to be pretty useful. I've had days out there we were taking the chlorophyll, sea surface temperature, we find a spot, run to, all right, we're going to that spot. Get out there, put this on, and have a couple of people drop iron, throw some chum, and when the lure comes down, the fish react to it. Even if they don't take it, they'll react to it, and you see that movement. And it's made a difference some days, and because I can see the lure going down, fluttering going down, and I can see when you're in the tuna, and stop, jig it a couple of times, oop, hooked up. And what you're seeing here is you're seeing the lure coming down, seeing the fish coming in from over here, boom, taking it. Okay, this is Panoptics. This operates at 455 kilohertz up to about 700 kilohertz. Okay, how many of you heard about LiveScope? Okay, LiveScope is also Panoptics, but it's Panoptics at 1100 kilohertz, from about 600 to 1100 kilohertz. That's why the picture's a little bit different here. You don't see the actual shape of the fish. LiveScope, you'll see the shape of the fish. Okay. They just came out with a new transducer for the Panoptics, because Panoptics is only good to a couple hundred feet. I'm swapping my transducer, and I'll be able to look 1,000 feet with it, but and a faster return. So the current version of LiveScope, the LVS 34, will look 300 feet in fresh water, which is about 180 feet in salt water. It will work in salt water, but you're just reduced on how far you can see. Most people aren't going to fish deeper than 180 feet anyway. So, okay.
Del, what's the transducer? Is that thing to stick down and you lower it, or it's a fixed transducer?
It's a fixed on the Panoptics, yeah. Jeremy put it on his boat, and he's got one that he actually puts down that he can point in a direction, and it's a different transducer than this. What, PS30?
It's a PS31.
Yeah. And yeah, on the sled I put the LiveScope, and I put it on a pole so I could turn it around and look. And I was basically shooting it behind the boat so I could see what was coming into the spread when I was springer fishing. And we had a day out there where we could see the bait fish flash in on the bait and the flashers, and then little bitty bait fish. But it was interesting what you see on LiveScope and on Panoptics. So, but there's been days this has made a huge difference. This looks straight down. I can tilt it just a little bit to look about 20 degrees forward or back, but it's a fixed transducer. It's got a big fairing block. It slows my boat down 3 knots with 900 horse. So, I mean, it's a big fairing block. So I told him, I said, you can put that on there, but if that doesn't work, you're taking it off. So, and that's not part of what you owe me. So when Garmin owed me a bunch of money, and so it was funny, but it was like, wow. So here's the same thing, different picture. Okay, you're gonna see the lure come down. Actually, it'll come down from here. It's looking forward here, the boat's sitting right here. See the lure come down here in a second. See that fish coming across the bottom? See the lure coming down? Jig it, jig it. Oop, fish turned around, and he's going to jig it one more time. Boom, took it. Okay, that's just Panoptics. LiveScope, you can see the shape of the fish. You can see, I mean, even the shape of the lure. So, but so here's looking straight down, and basically what they've done is they've taken 2 pictures and they put them together as one picture. So here's the boat right here, and it's looking out about 14 feet to the side, boat sitting right there, and in about 30 feet of water. And so here's the version looking forward. Okay. And the boat's sitting right here. It looks 135 degrees. This is a different transducer than the one I have. Okay. This is the same transducer that the LiveScope has. So, all right. We talked about temperature, but I told you food's the number one thing, right? Now, off Oregon and Washington, midwater shrimp is the number one thing they eat. That has been the same for a lot of years now, because I checked it again with Oregon State Marine Sciences here a year or so ago, and it was the same, still the same. Okay, anchovy number 2, squid number 3, blue lanternfish, and then asari. Does anybody know where the midwater shrimp is found? The name will give you a hint, midwater. Does anybody know where the midwater's at? 1,200 to 2,200 feet of depth is the midwater. So if that's the number one thing they eat, they're spending most of their time way below anything we can fish. Okay, remember I told you they come up 24 times and they go down 24 times in a 24-hour period? Okay, so obviously they're going up and down, and they're feeding down in there and then coming up and down. So anchovies and the things we have on the surface is the only thing that's keeping them on the surface for us to fish for them. So when we don't have much anchovies, there's not much reason for them to be on the surface. Okay, a couple years ago, the commercial fleet that fishes the cod and some of those, and the ground fish was just shut off. Well, they gave them additional quota on anchovies. And our tuna season was horrible because they took most of the anchovies on the surface. So the PFMC did that. So Oregon State they don't monitor the tuna out here, so it was no big deal to them what was going on. But it did make a difference. It made a difference to us sport guys. Commercial guys had to go way farther offshore to get tuna that year. It impacted us pretty good. So our fishery was horrible. Northern California, squid's number 1, juvenile rockfish number 2, krill number 3, and asari and an anchovy. Okay. There's your midwater shrimp. Kind of bluish, silver, a little bit of orange to it. So squid, pearl, white kind of color. And then your asari, your blue lanternfish, your anchovy. And the midwater shrimp is really small. So krill kind of looks like a midwater shrimp, doesn't it? Similar. Squid, asari, juvenile rockfish. So when they say juvenile rockfish, they're just a baby rockfish. Okay, sea bass, little guys. So trolling gear. Your trolling rods, you're better off to have a little bit of a stiff tip on a trolling rod. Some guys will try to use a rod they might use for halibut. You can get away with that a lot of times, but if you have a soft tip to try to feel that bite for a halibut, and you're fishing on a day it's sporty, your lure is just going to pop in the surface. They're not going to be running flat. They're going to be popping and jigging, and because it's going to be catching, and then and you're better off with a little bit stiffer rod for that day. But length doesn't matter. You can get away whatever you want to fish, doesn't matter. 5 foot 6, 8 foot, doesn't really matter. Okay? What matters is if the tip is stiff, and what matters is what you put on it for a reel. Okay? Most of the time, a reel that's got a line guide on it is probably not going to work. Pen's the only reel manufacturer that I'm aware of that the line guide can actually, the gearing strong enough and heavy duty enough to hold up the blistering runs. Most other reel manufacturers don't make line guides with the gearing strong enough to hold up to those blistering runs. So you're better off with an open face reel that, you're not going to have to worry about that. Now, This is a Saltus size 40 lever drag. You don't need a lever drag for a trolling reel. It just happened to be that the reel matched the rod, so and I'm sponsored by Daiwa, so I put that on it. But it holds plenty of line. You don't have to have giant reels for albacore, okay? It's got plenty of drag to it. There was on Albacore Addicts the other day, somebody was asking about the amount of drag on a reel. Well, that kind of varies a little bit, because on your trolling reel, most of the time you've got heavier line, you can get away with putting more drag on them. But how many of you guys have ever tested or set your drags with a scale? You ever done that? You know how much 7 pounds of drag is? That's quite a bit. Anybody ever had a fish on with 20 pounds of drag that you knew you had 20 pounds? You know, we fish those giant bluefin on the East Coast, and strike is set at 25. And at 25, you can't stand up and hold that rod and walk around on the boat. You can maybe stand there and hold the rod, you know, bracing yourself, but you're not going to walk around on that boat not holding that rod. So, and when we get the last half of the battle on those reels, we're at 50 pounds of drag. I guarantee you can't, you know, because when we're at that, we have somebody standing beside that person so they don't get too far over. And bloop. So, in most cases, 7 pounds of drag, 7 or 8 pounds of drag on your trolling reel is quite a bit. If you're live bait fishing with 30 pounds of fluorocarbon, you probably don't want to be heavier than 7 pounds, because you're probably going to break them off too often. So it's play with that a little bit, get used to that. Open face reel, large capacity, 300 yards, anywhere 40 to 65, 80 pound if you want. Like I said, it doesn't really matter. I've got a top shot on this. This is only 50-pound top shot. You know, back your drags off a little bit if you want to fish a little bit lighter. I don't run them way up. I have them just hard enough that those, you know, I can still put 7 pounds of drag on this, and they'll be hooked great. And and with a top shot like this, you can do a couple of things. One, you can measure this top shot. Let's say you want this rod set up to be a certain place in your spread. You put a certain length of top shot on it, and then on the back of it, write a number. That way you know where it's at in the spread. So that way, if you have different people fishing with you who aren't, you know, used to where to put the rod, it's like, you know, tell you what that, you know, what's to say on the back of your rod? Well, it's 65. Oh, that's long on the rigger out there. Okay. That way they can put it out without having to worry about where it's at, because when it gets to where the braid and the top shot come together, stop. Okay. That way you know it's right where you want it in the spread. You've measured it. Okay. The only adjustment to it is on a sporty day. Where's it at where's your lure at in relation to the wake? Okay. And then adjust it from there. So, and then on your swivels, you can use a number of different things for a swivel, but I like these corkscrew swivels. Rated 1 twist, not the multiple twist ones. Those things are hard to get anything off or on those things, but just a 1 twist. See that? They don't come off. I've never had one come off. And to get it off, that's pretty quick. Pretty easy. They last, but make sure they're test rated, okay? You buy your swivels out of the bulk bin and reach down and grab them, chances are a tuna is going to pull that guy apart. If they're cheap swivels, they'll pull it apart. So you want to spend a little bit of money for your swivels. A lot of guys will run braid on their main line. No biggie. If you're going to run straight mono, clearly you're going to have a bigger reel to hold that. But your leaders, mono or fluorocarbon, either one. You don't have to have fluorocarbon. You get late in the season, you're going to fish swim baits, things like that. Yeah, you're going to probably switch to fluorocarbon, and I'll cover that. But Hand lines, typically we call them blue cord. You can make them various lengths. Some guys fish all hand lines, and they're all various lengths. But fish a diver like this. Most of us don't have a rod on board the boat that can hold that guy. Trolling at 6-7 miles an hour. That guy, you'd have to have your drag set at about 30 pounds of drag to hold that guy. Which these rods is just going to peel line off. So to get the lure down. There's other ways to get down. Planer boards, diving lures, things like that. So for trolling lures, you got a number of things you can use. Yozuris, Rapalas, the Nomad, Mad Max, DTXs, the new X-Rap Extremes, and then your cedar plugs, plain wood cedar plugs. Okay. Plain wood cedar plug probably catch of all the cedar plugs, it catches the most. If you're working on a budget, add purple black to it. Between purple black and plain, you're probably going to get most of your lures. The Mad Max, these guys by Nomad, they're pretty good. And then the DTX is basically looks like an X-Rap. Okay, it's self-tuning. So, and I typically take the belly hook off of the X-Raps or these guys. Okay, they're going to get hooked off the back guy, and the forward guy belly hook, that's just dangerous. All that is there to get you. So, but and then your daisy chains, and there's a number of I make my own daisy chains. But typically on a daisy chain, about 6 feet long, come down, put a swivel on one end, come down about 10 to 12 inches, put a crimp, slide a hoochie. Mine are pink and white, so I typically slide a pink hoochie in, then or a white hoochie, mother of pearl hoochie, then a pink hoochie, and put a 3/8 ounce egg sinker up underneath it, and then I put a bead behind it so when it comes against that crimp, it won't hurt. The crimp won't go up inside the lead or anything. So that way it will slide a little bit. Go down about another 10 inches, put another one on. Go down about another 10 inches, put another one on. And the last one, put a hook on him. They're going to hit the last one because that's the slow poke. Okay? I've had days where the daisy chains were the only thing catching fish. So my daisy, I have number of different colored daisy chains, but I typically fish the pink and white daisy chains. So there's your feathered lures, a Zucker feather, okay, Mexican flag color. Then you got a solid vinyl. Then you've got the Zucker broomtail. This is a root beer color. There's the cedar plugs. Like I said, this is the main guy. So, and you can get new hooks for them. There's your Mad Max. There's the Nomad DTX, and then your Rapala X-Rap Extreme are the new ones out. They're also self-tuning. So, and dive 10, 12 feet, depending on how fast you're going. But these got the Mad Max, you can control them up to 20 miles an hour. So they're also self-tuning. But colors. When I wrote my book, I researched this quite a bit, talked to quite a few people, went back to talk to people that had years and years of experience. And it was interesting because I was under the impression on light days you fish light colors. It's bright, fish light colors. Dark, cloudy days, maybe fish purple black, something dark looking. And what I found was, well, I've got this lure that catches most of my fish. That's what I put out. They have their favorite lures. That's what they put out. And I got thinking about how I fish. And it's like, oh, that's typically how I fish. I put pink and white out. That's my go-to lure most of the time. So sometimes if I'm not catching fish, I'll change it. But so you'll, as you learn and as you start catching fish, you'll get real confident with certain lures. That lure catches fish. So you have a tendency to want to put that lure out. You're confident it's going to catch fish. And because of your confidence level in that, you put that lure out. And you catch fish. So teasers are made to simulate a school of bait. These are Albi bars. Albert De Silva makes these. But this guy has a swivel on the end of it. Okay. And this guy's 18 inches wide, and you typically hook your lure to this guy. Okay. Drop him overboard, put him back a ways, and they'll hit the lure on here. Now, I've had days where I've had this guy out there, wasn't catching fish. The inside rods were catching fish. It's like, all right, took that guy off. Just put a regular lure out that like the inside rods were catching fish. My whole bite went away. It just died. It's like, whoa. Bring that rod back in, take the lure off, put that back on, put it back out there, boom, those inside rods started going again. Oh, note to self. It's working, but it doesn't need to catch a fish if it's helping the inside rods catch fish, okay? So I typically run them on my riggers a little farther back. Some guys will run them off the corners. So it's whatever you prefer. There's no set thing where to put them. So some guys will run boon birds, and I've seen guys, they don't do it so much anymore, but when I was first getting into it, there was guys running logging chain, about that much logging chain, big heavy logging chain. They'd tie it to blue cord, and then they'd put a swivel on the backside, and then they'd put their lure behind it. And that logging chain would settle down in the water, and the water going through those links would create a bubble trail. And the biggest thing is creating a disturbance in the water. So I should have brought the daisy chain I made. How many of you have ever fished lake trolls for trout and kokanee? You know what a willow leaf is? I had Jeremy, Kokanee Kid, make me a set of lake trolls with willow leaves, but put them on cable so they wouldn't disintegrate. Holy moly. Those things throw rooster tails at 7 miles an hour. But there's days those things were the only thing that was catching fish. I fished them last year for the first time. It's like, whew. And you can't put them on a release clip. They won't, the release clip won't hold them. They're tugging, they're catching so much water that you got to put them on. I mean, you can hold them on a trolling rod, but you've got to tighten the drag just slightly. But man, they're creating quite a ruckus back there. It's interesting. So here's the daisy chain here. There's your first one, okay? And that guy's got the hook on the end of him. So big spinning glows. I've seen guys, I told you how I make my daisy chains. I've seen guys put the really, really big spinning glows on, do that. They do the same thing. They throw a rooster, and they're just spraying water coming through the water. They don't pull as hard as the willow leaves, but boy, are they spraying water. It's all about creating a ruckus, creating a disturbance, okay? Your trolling patterns, whether you put a V shape or a W shape, doesn't really matter. In a V shape, you're trying to create this effect, okay? With your longest rods being the rods that are the farthest out to the side. You don't have to have outriggers to be effective fishing tuna. I've had a couple seasons where I flew flags off mine and that was it. Just left them up in the air. Fishing like pocket rod holders. Normally, your back corner ones here, we're fishing those anywhere from 20 to 35 feet back, okay? And a lot of times we'll put a release clip back here on the corner. And normally I have one of those with me, but I don't. So what we're doing is, if your rod's in the back corner pocket, and if it's 6'6" like this guy, it's up in the air, but if you're only trolling like 20 feet behind the boat, you've got a bit of an angle on him, okay? So he could skip a little bit in the water. So typically we'll put a flatline clip, which is a release clip, on a little cord, or you can mount it on the back of your boat, just on the back side edge of the gunnel. You pull your line down, put it in the clip, and now it's running flat, okay? You've just changed the angle on your line so that way it's gonna run through the water a lot better. Less chance of it skipping. No, that's not it. So, it's probably,
It was in there.
yeah. Here we go.
We run it out to drain sometimes.
Yeah, I put this on a cleat most of the time on the back and then put the line in it, okay? You can adjust it over here, tighten it up. But like I said, those willow leaf daisy chain, forget putting it in a clip. It's not gonna hold it. I tried. So, question?
I have a question about you're talking about creating a ruckus and some of these throwing rooster tails, but you're also saying some of the softer tip rods, they kind of skip. And I've noticed in my boat that I have a few that do that. So that skipping isn't creating a ruckus you want.
No, you don't want the lure skipping. You want the ruckus being created from the teaser and the lure behind it be constant.
That was a ruckus that would maybe help. But
No,
okay.
no. But one of the things you can do if you have that soft tip rod is try to put it in a release clip in a flatline clip. Get it down low, because sometimes that'll help with those soft tip rods. Okay, it's not uncommon for people working on a budget to try to use halibut rods for their tuna rods, and
I have a mixture of both.
yeah, a lot of people do. And that's one thing you can do to try to help with that. So, yeah. So, this guy might be 20 to 35 feet back. Your next guy coming behind him here, you typically don't want him more than about 10 or 15 feet. Okay? To the next one. Let's say you're not fishing the outriggers, you're just fishing a pocket right there in the gunnel. You got another one. And maybe you got another one that you can stick sideways out and put him back about here. And from this guy, you want him another 10 or 15 feet, okay? The reason you don't want to be more than about 15 feet is you're trying to keep your spread tight. If you spread your lures out, you're going to get singles and maybe doubles. If you have your spread tight, now you've got a school of bait fish coming through the water, or what looks like a school of bait fish coming through the water, and that's where you can get your triples and your quads and multiple hookups, is by having your spread tight, close together, okay? If you're fishing the outriggers, we call that the long rigger. The center line, most of the time we call that a shotgun rig, and the corner one, if it's on a flat line clip, you know, the flat line or corner rod. But so like I said, 25 to 75 feet. I run my teasers off the corners or off the riggers. Some guys will run them off the corners. You might have, I have put them out where I've had them on the long riggers, and I've also had one on the shotgun rig. So these plastic guys, you lay them in the water, most of the time with the boat moving, most of the time they'll entangle themselves. If you fish the titanium ones, those things are a mess. You got to untangle them and lay them down gently. They don't untangle themselves, not like the plastic guys do. So, trolling speed varies depending on the lures, 5 to 8 miles an hour for most of your troll gear. Swim baits, 1.5 to 3, maybe up to 5. You get to you can troll them faster than that, but most of the time you'll beat the tails off the back of them. So, don't troll through a school of tuna, okay? Boat attitude. That has to do with how the water comes off your boat, underneath your boat. What you have underneath your boat for transducers, sticking down like my big fairing block. 3 motors, I bring my center motor up, turn it off. That way I'm trolling with 2 motors. Look behind the boat. Bring my trim tabs all the way up from when I was running to get out there. Now I've got them all the way up, okay? And check my trim on my motors. I want that water coming off the back of the boat to be pretty clean, okay? So boat attitude deals with how clean's your water coming off your boat, okay? It does make a difference. When I had my 26 striper, I had a buddy who also had the same identical boat as I did. We were at a Newport fishing. He was running Mexican flag lures. I was running Mexican. I couldn't get a bite. I mean, I was 200 yards from him. I couldn't get a bite on those Mexican flag lures. He was running outboards. I was running an IO. I switched to zucchini, started catching fish. Could not catch a fish on those Mexican flags. The only difference between our boats was the motors, the outdrives. Okay. How many of you have sold a boat before? It's like, man, I shouldn't have sold that boat. That boat was fishy. There's a lot to that. Every boat puts off voltage, either positive or negative. Okay? It's not so, it doesn't affect tuna quite as much as it does salmon, but every boat puts off voltage. And if you've got a boat that is really fishy, that catches a lot of fish, yeah, you're probably doing okay. But if all of a sudden now you're not catching any fish, you may want to check it. Okay? I was fishing buoy 10 one year, and a lot of times over on the red line, late in the season when the coho are running real hard, we get up in that red line and we stick our nose into the incoming tide, and it'll be boat beside, I mean tight, really tight. We'd been hammering them, catching our fish, I mean lots of fish. Get out the next day, get out there, we're not even getting bit, not even a bite. And the boats beside us are catching fish, and behind us are catching fish, but we're not getting bit. It's like checking gear, washing stuff, changing stuff. Go back to the dock. I called Jake at Schooner Creek. It's like, I think my boat's hot. And sure enough, he come down. He was down there 7 o'clock next morning. By noon, he had me going again. My onboard charger from my shore power had gotten salt water in there, had corroded it, and it was shorted out. So I've had that happen probably 3 times in 30 years of fishing. So having seen it before, I kind of, it's like, man, when you're catching fish one day and you're not doing anything the next, and you're doing the same thing, there's reasons for that. Boat attitude is one of those things where water coming off the bottom of the boat does make a difference. How you fish. Every boat's going to fish different. You need to learn how your boat fishes. Just because Joe's boat over here fishes this way, we can try that, but if it doesn't work, we need to learn how our boat's going to fish. Okay? S-turns, speed up, slow down, you know. Maybe they like a different speed. Maybe they like that outside rod when it speeds up and is trying to get away from them. But and then keep your pattern tight. Okay. If you're fishing swim baits and you're putting them way back, keep your pattern tight. It's harder to see them back there, but try to keep your pattern tight. As release clips goes, Z-clips, a lot of times people will mount those on the back of their boat. In that area. These work okay. The knockouts are probably one of the best out there because they've got a tightener adjustment here, adjustment there. They've got a ball bearing here, ball bearing there inside, and then they've got a roller that if it doesn't pop open, the line will come peeling off of it. Those are $50 a set of 2, but they last. A little bit of WD-40 on them every year, they'll last. But the AFCO Flatline, the AFCO roller, probably the worst release clip on the market. Okay? You'd think being made by AFCO would be pretty good. It's not bad, but the problem is, right here's your adjustment. So you put your line out, you put your gear out, put your line down in here, snap that guy closed, slide that adjustment up here. Maybe you don't fish on this boat very often, so you're not used to how much that should be, how far forward, and you get it too far forward, and it's got too much adjustment on it now, and the fish hits it and it doesn't pop open. All it's doing is peeling line. You know, if that's braid, you just need to back off and wait for that to stop. Otherwise, good way to get your hand cut with braid zipping through there at Mach 3. So I started using these years ago, and when I had different people fishing with me, and half the time they wouldn't get them set back to the same adjustment, I realized, like, these things are crap. And so I went to these guys and haven't had a problem with them since. So they work pretty good. The zip clips, they're not bad. You need to adjust, put some WD-40 on them periodically, otherwise they will get sticky and not work very well. But and then when you're going out fishing, remember I told you on the sea surface temperature chart, that told me how I was going to have to fish. Okay, well, if I have people fishing with me, let's say I'm doing a charity trip, it's like, you guys just want to go catch fish today? Or is there something you want to learn? You know, do you want to learn how to work the iron? Do you want to fish live bait? I mean, no, you know, we don't care. All right. Or maybe they do. I've had people say, well, yeah, we want to learn how to convert troll caught fish to a wide open bite. All right. You know, so let's say that's what we're going to go out there to do. How do we convert trolling into dead in the water, fishing them, live bait, iron, whatever? Okay? So one of the first things you have to decide is, if that's how we're going to fish, then when you're trolling and the fish hits, you need to pull the throttles back immediately into neutral. If you try to load those rods up and then try to convert that, 90% of the time you won't get it done unless the fish are just so hungry. Okay? But most of the time you're not going to get that done. It's not going to happen. The odds of it are extremely slim. Okay? So, bzzz, rod goes off. You're pulling the throttle back to neutral. I even go into reverse just a little bit to stop my slide. Not trying to back up, but just trying to stop my slide. Okay? So I stay with that fish. Okay? Now, this is where the teamwork part kicks in, and everybody has a job to do, and you need to know what I'm doing, what you're doing, and so that way it all works. And so everybody has a job. So typically, if this is what we're going to do today, before we leave the dock, it's like, all right, if you guys are fishing with me, you're going to throw a drop back rig, okay? You're going to chum, and then you're going to grab a rod and, you know, maybe iron, and maybe you're going to fish live bait, and maybe you're going to fish live bait, okay? And or maybe you two both are going to fish iron, but you're going to know what you're going to do, okay? And typically for a drop back rig, that can be anything. That could be a piece of iron. Most time I'll use a spin rod for my drop back. Spin rod's easy to pitch, okay? And most time I use a swim bait for that. That could be a small piece of iron. It'll work just as well, okay? So this rod needs to be somewhere in the back of the boat, really convenient to get to. I was fishing with John Boyer one year, and it was in June. We were gonna go look to see if we could find tuna. Nobody caught any tuna yet. And I had 3 rods with me. And we had Dylan Shore fishing with us as well. He kept putting my rod up in the rocket launchers. It's like, Dylan, it's like, I can't get to that because the rocket launchers on his Cabo were just high enough. I had to step up on something to get up to him. It's like, man, I'm missing that timing to get that rod, get it down and get this swim. So this needs to be, I'd leave it back in the corner. Normally that looked like the back of the boat's kind of messy. You know, it's not put away. It's not sticking in a rod holder or anything, you know, a gun or rod holder where I could just grab it and pitch it. There just wasn't enough of those to put this in it, so I just left it in the corner. He kept putting it up there. It's like, I'm going to beat you. You don't stop doing that. And finally he realized why it had to be so close. You've got to get this overboard really fast. You know, some guys will call it the magic minute. It's like, magic minute, my foot. You got to get this in 30 seconds or less, okay, most of the time. So what's going to happen is it's going to look like an orchestrated Chinese fire drill. So the rod goes off, trolling rod goes off, bzzz, come into neutral, come into reverse, stop the slide. As soon as but you're not waiting, if you're the drop back rig, you're not waiting for any of that. As soon as you hear the zzz, you're on deck, okay? Grab the spin bait rod, pitch it right at that fish that's hooked. Don't pitch it over here, don't pitch it over here. Go right at that fish that's hooked. You're never going to tangle him up. I've never seen it happen. Okay? Pitch it straight at him. That way you can be close to the fish that's close to him. Bail's open. As long as there's line coming out, let it keep coming out. Once the boat's stopped, and for about another 10 seconds, if they don't pick it up, flip the bail up, stick it in a rod holder. It's out there, the swim bait's bobbing, he's fishing. Okay? If he picks it up, it's just going to feel like a trout bite. You just feel, look, just flip the bail over and you'll be hooked up. Okay? So that's the drop back rig.
How heavy a drag?
And this is probably about 6 pounds on this. Is about what I have them at. 6, 7. So I have 30-pound fluorocarbon on it, so you can't get much heavier than 7, you'll snap them off. So that's the drop back. All right, now the boat has stopped moving, okay? You've chummed. You can't drop iron unless the boat stopped moving, because if you start dropping iron, the boat's still sliding or moving, your iron's gonna be at an angle. That's not gonna work. The iron needs to be vertical, okay? I've switched my screens fishing, so I also have my Panoptics screen on, and I can tell you, all right, drop iron. And I'll tell you how far to drop it, okay? And I'll watch the screen because I can see it going down, okay? Let's say you don't have Panoptics, and how far should I let it go down? You could put metered line on there, and then, you know, a sonar, a lot of sonars will see the fish, and you know, so, and if you can't see the fish, turn your gain up on your sonar until it starts getting fuzzy, and then back it off slightly, okay? And a lot of times you'll start seeing those fish. So you'll see the thermocline first. That'll really show up, okay, when you turn that gain up. So now we've dropped the drop back rig, we've pitched that drop back rig at that tuna. You've already chummed, and you're gonna drop iron, and now the boat stopped, okay? This is all happening all at the same time, okay? You guys are dropping them, okay? And now you're working iron, okay? Oop, you're hooked up. Perfect. Drop back rig's still out there. I'm clearing the gear. Somebody's gotta be the deckhand, okay? So I'm clearing the gear. We're leaving the fish that's hooked, the one we caught on the troll. He's staying out there. We're leaving him. I'm clearing the other troll gear to get it out of the way, okay? You're grabbing maybe a live bait rod and gonna fish live bait, okay? We fish live bait and iron together a lot, and so the iron a lot of times will keep the live bait bite going longer. So you just have to be careful you don't get them tangled up, or you've just lost a $15 lure. So, but work that for a little bit. If you don't get them to go right away, chum a little more, work it a little bit more, change the speed of your iron a little bit. You know, maybe you're pumping it a little too fast, maybe slow down, go a little slower. And I'll cover that, I'll get into that too, working the iron. But work that 15, 20, 30 minutes. Remember, 90% of catching albacore is finding them. You found them, so let's figure out how to get them to go. They're here, okay? Most of the time you just have to fiddle with it to get them to go, okay? So we did this, we went into this routine, we threw the drop back, we didn't hook them up, we just got the one fish. All right, back on the troll we go, okay? Worked it 20, 30 seconds, didn't get him to go. All right, bring him in, we're back on the troll. So get back on the troll. I fished a father and 2 sons. The father was a rep for a tackle rep, bought a trip at a charity event. How many fish did he want today? Well, one son wanted 6. Dad wanted 6. The other son, well, 6 sounds good. 18 fish. We just fished a few days earlier, man, they were chomping. It's like, oh, we're gonna be done early. Oh yeah. Nope, that didn't happen. Out there, get to a kelp patty, pitch a swim bait to it, hook them up, think, oh, great, we're gonna get them going. 1 fish. Go on the troll. Go into the routine. They didn't want to learn, but we were going to teach them how to do it anyway, so that way we could just try to get them going, and nope. 1 fish, 2 fish, 1 fish, 2 fish. At noon, we had 10 fish in the box. I mean, we were just picking off 1 here, 2 there on the troll. It's like, geez. It's like far cry from what it was just a couple of days earlier. But at noon, I mean, we've done this like 6, 7, 8 times now. Boom, it went wide open. And we had them going. And it was greasy, flat ocean. And we didn't have live bait. We were off Garibaldi. We were just doing iron. We'd thrown a little chum, and we had them going on iron, and it was wide open. And a lot of times when you're fishing iron or even live bait, once you get them going, the whole school comes right up underneath the boat. And you drop that iron, and it fluttered a couple times, whoom, they'd be on it. And bleed bucket's now full, and it holds 10 to 12. There's 10 in the fish box. They only wanted 18. And it's going so fast and so heavy, I'm gaffing them, and it's like I have nowhere to put them because catching them on iron, other than jack pulling, there's no quicker way of catching fish than iron. I had 10 or 12 fish laying on the floor. Gaff them, cut them, drop them on the floor. And it's like, hey guys, you're way over what you want to keep. You guys can stop any time. And I happened to look, and the one son had his rod inside the boat with the lure hanging inside the boat. He had just stopped. He was toast. The other son had a fish on. He goes, oh man, I get this in, I'm going to stop. And the dad is the same thing. He says, well, I'm going to stop. And Weddy was with me, and she just pitched with a spin rod, a little piece of iron. Well, I'll just bring this back, then it hooks up. Don't put anything overboard. I mean, they were darting everywhere. You know, on a flat, greasy ocean, it's a lot of fun because you can just see them dart. It looks like an aquarium under the boat, just streaking past you. And that iron, when it hits the water and flutters once, they were just on it. But that was noon. We had probably tried it 6, 7, 8 times and didn't get it going. So don't give up on it. You know, you got to work it. You got to work it. You got to work it. And you keep practicing that, and you'll get really good at that. Okay? So converting the bite, hooked up, now what? You have to make that decision. Am I going to troll and try to load up my rods, or do I want to try to convert to a wide open bite? You have to make that commitment one way or the other. Otherwise, we had a day when we were first tournament fishing, and we had taken second in Owaka. We were back in Garibaldi. We were headed to Charleston. It's like, we need to practice iron more. All right. And there was 2 boats that left 2 hours before daylight in a lightning storm going southwest so they could get down there on the first light and be there at first light. Well, I needed fuel, so we couldn't leave till the fuel dock so we got fuel, and we needed ice. Like, nah, all right. So we get down there. It's like 9:30 in the morning. We're putting the gear out, and I call, hey, Dan, where you got, how's it going? Well, we just got our first fish. Ooh, been kind of slow. All right, where's Dick at? Well, he's, talking in code. It's like, well, he's, 5 clicks, da-da-da-da-da from where, all right. So knew where they were at. I'll let you know if we get anything. I just hang the mic up, zzz, the rod went off. And we went into our routine, and boom, we were wide open on iron. And that's what we were trying to do, is practice working the iron. We didn't get much practice on the iron because it just went wide open. And within 40 minutes, we had 34 fish on the deck. It's like, oh crap, we forgot to have that conversation about how many fish we want today. It's like, and nobody really wanted that many, and it's like, stop. So we just stopped just like that. So I don't know if you remember that day, but man, it's like we just stopped. Hey, Dan, we're headed in. We got all our fish. It's like, he fished till dark and came in very grumpy. He had 18 fish. And it was probably another year or 2 before we had a conversation. And he would never come to a seminar, but he was trolling, trying to load the rods up and then trying to convert. So he was trolling, but he was only getting like 1 fish, and he trolled away from the school by the time he shut down to try to convert. I don't know how many times I've heard that from people trying to do that, but he was pretty upset at the end of the day. I mean, we just put a whooping on him real quick and came back in. We were back in before noon, but It just worked for us on that first hookup. Some days it won't. Some days it's going to be. You're going to be doing it a few times. Have a dozen fish in the box, and then boom, it'll happen. So, well, let's see. We talked about the drop back. Leave the troll. One person's got to be the deckhand. You got to figure out who that is. Don't be a bunch of you trying to clear the gear. You need to get that bite going. One guy. Okay.
Got a question for you. How many rods are you running when you're trolling like that to get your bite? Before you switch to iron, you run like 7 to 9, or is it more or less?
Well, I'm never fishing more than 6. Because if you're trying to convert that to a wide open bite, sometimes I might only be doing 4 if I'm trolling to find the fish. So the less rods you have to clear, the better off you are. Now, I told you that when I was looking at sea surface and chlorophyll, and then would pick a spot and we'd run to that spot. I don't know how many times over a period of, 4 or 5 years with that Panoptix, we'd run to that spot and we'd stop, drop iron, throw some chum, and we'd get them going right there. Never even trolled. It was probably, Weddy, 70% of the time we'd get them going? Yeah. If we didn't get them going, we'd maybe move a mile and try it again. Yeah, but normally we'd get them going. Just doing that, picking a spot and driving to it, throwing some chum, dropping some iron, and Weddy and Megan one of them would drop a little farther than the other one, and one of them would pick a different speed coming back, maybe a fast retrieve versus someone with a little bit slower retrieve, to see what speed they wanted. Because speed does make a difference on iron. So.
There was a time, one time, nobody's catching any fish. We're driving around in your hydrosport, trolling, nothing. You're seeing marks, and you're like, this is stupid. And we stopped the boat and cleared the lines and dropped iron and loaded the boat.
Yep.
Never saw a jumper. Nobody ever hooked a troll fish. But you kept seeing them down there 40 feet on the...
They were in that thermocline.
And they wouldn't come up. They didn't
Nope.
want to come up.
Yeah. You know, and I can tell you that years before that, I don't know how many times I come back in with no fish. A day trolling all day with no fish. I knew there was fish there. You know, and I've asked people, it's like, how many times have you had that happen? I mean, a lot of people have been in that situation. Years ago, when they first started coming out with the swim baits, you know, we were out there one time and somebody was talking about fish traps on the radio. What the hell is a fish trap? You know, it's like, is this a box with that you're trapping the fish that you try? I've never heard of one of those. You know, it's like, I got to look that up. It's like, you know, it was a swim bait made by a company called Fish Trap. So, and that just goes to show you there's a lot of people who do a lot of funky stuff to try to catch fish. And there's a lot of things will catch an albacore. So, you know, I have a buddy that was throwing, remember the time on 4th of July she was sick and you and I went and Roy was throwing shrimp overboard that was dyed? No,
it was macaroni.
Macaroni. Yeah, dyed to look like shrimp. And that one time we come driving by this huge green slick. He had all different kinds of colors of stuff he was experimenting with, and with shrimp, with oils, and yeah. Don't be afraid to try stuff. I don't know if that shrimp would have worked on a live bait hook or not, but it would have been interesting to see. Question.
For speed of converting that, just getting everything off the deck fast, do you find a couple of hand lines quicker, or is it always faster to grab a rod and reel?
I don't fish hand lines so much anymore, but I don't see where that would really make that much of a difference between a hand line versus a rod and reel. So you might be able to pull a hand line in quicker. So, question.
So there's a lot of stuff going on. Everybody kind of has their own theory as far as when to convert. Do you have a personal rule where if you say if one rod goes off, am I going to troll just a little bit farther?
Oh no, I don't do that.
See if I get a triple?
Absolutely not.
When one rod goes, you stop.
Yeah.
Okay.
You have to commit.
Okay.
If you're trying to get a wide open bite going, you have to commit to stopping on that first rod that goes off.
If you're someone that has live bait.
If there's one there, there's many more. Right?
Yes.
So,
Under that theory, normally they're traveling in the school, so yeah. So, yeah. But you know, the day we did it on just iron, you know, you know, we didn't have live bait. We were chumming with dead bait. That might have made a difference. Although I had a time, I was fishing a rider one time quite a few years ago. The first time Anthony ever fished with me, and I was chumming with food grade calamari. I'd put it in a bucket of water and thawed it out on the run out, and it was a frozen block out of the food section of the grocery store. And I chopped it up into 1/4 inch bite-sized pieces, and on the first fish, you know, I just threw a handful and never had to throw any more, and we were wide open on iron, and stayed that way for hours. But so yeah, but it does make a difference. You need to stop on that first fish, and you need to get your slide stopped. Okay, if you really want to stay with that fish, because you're going to keep sliding for a while.
Right.
So, okay.
So you've got one guy on a rod. You're actually, in some cases, are you hitting reverse to slowly?
Yes, I am. I'm always hitting reverse to stop my slide. Yeah. No, I don't want to back up into my gear. I just want to stop.
You have on.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't want to back up into your gear. Just get yourself stopped.
Yeah.
So, you're out there. They're jumping. They're not biting. Now what are you going to do? Remember I told you when the water temp gets to 63 degrees or higher, they're going to be jumping and they're probably not going to be biting. Okay? They're going to be down in that thermocline. So you got to change your gear, change your tactics. Only one arrow in your quiver really limits your opportunities. So you can learn to work the iron. That's an investment into the rods and reels and the iron. Learn to fish swim baits. Not bad, not an expensive endeavor. Can be a lot of fun. And then refining your troll techniques a little bit. So, but dropping down to smaller trolling lures under 3 inches, switch to fluorocarbon, but and then swim baits, diving lures. So, for swim baits, for a long time, the green sardine. This is a walleye whacker by Big Hammer, and then the Channel Island Chovy. But walleye whacker is my #1 swim bait today. It's kind of a pearl color with a dark back. Okay. You guys pass that around. Eat Me Lures is now making some pretty good looking swim baits, and so is Pro Escobedo with VIP Outdoors. He's gotten into it. He's also making some pretty good looking swim baits. So, Fish Traps no longer in business. These guys carry swim baits. They were carrying Big Hammer. I don't know if they still are or not, but and then England Marine also carries them. So, if you're going to troll the swim baits, you need to get this hook in this swim bait nice and square. Okay? So typically the best way to do that is take this hook, put it right here, and see where that hook would come out of there. Take that and mark it right there. Now you know where the hook needs to come out at. So that way this is nice and snug up against it. Okay? Some guys will glue this thing. If you mark this and you come out right there, you'll be nice and snug against that. You won't have to put glue on it. Okay? And hopefully you're going to catch enough fish. They're going to tear it up after. They'll last about 2 fish, and then they're going to tear it up enough that you can't fish it again. So, okay? So you want to thread it so it comes right out. This guy's been on and off here so many times. I'm about worn him out, putting him on and off. Okay.
What size heads are you using? 2, 3?
I use 2s. I will have 1 ounce and 2 ounce on board, and I'll have 5 inch and 3.5 inch swim baits. When I had my striper, I had about every size swim bait you could have on there, and about every size jig head you could have on there. And When I sold that boat, that must have been 5,000 pounds of gear that came off that boat in the front. So, geez, it was a lot. So measure it there. I already have so many holes in this thing from putting him on and off. I know where to put him through it, and then mark him in the back. Start threading it in there. Yeah, I've worn him out. Torn him up, putting him on and off. So, and then 1 ounce, 2 ounce, they should have eyes on them, okay? If you're fishing, catching fish, one of the eyes falls off. If it's still catching fish, keep catching fish. If it stops catching fish, change the jig head, okay? Does it need to be painted? No, it doesn't matter. I've never seen that to make a difference, whether it's painted or not painted. The eye does make a difference, so on the swim bait. So I don't think he's seen too many seminars, torn him up, putting him on and off so many times. But, and then tie him straight on with fluorocarbon. Do not put a swivel in there, okay? And you can see the knot. So I got, what, maybe 4 or 5 feet of fluorocarbon. You don't need an awful lot. So, and then, no. I have seen guys put swivels between them and get away with it with a little, really little swivel. But was out that first time Anthony fished with us. I was fishing that rider, and he was wanting to learn swim baits and iron. And so for a little bit, we were running to jumpers. We'd see a jumper, slide up to it, take the boat out of gear, and then if in my boat, you can be in the bow of the boat and pitch that swim bait over to that tuna. And when you think you can get to it, pitch it out there. Well, Anthony shows up and he's in these bright, really bright, white, brand new bibs. And he's up on the bow of the boat and he's pitching it out there and he hits the water, settles for about 10, 15 seconds. He's bringing it back. It's like, let's go find another one. Doesn't get that one. So we moved, found another jumper. Anthony, get down on your knees. Those bibs are so bright, you're scaring the fish. Oh, so he's down. Pitch that out there, you know, and let it settle. You know, and I've got the rider, and I've got another buddy who had never fished swim baits and iron. All looking, it's like, you know, it's like, and Anthony's down. And it's like we're all out stealthy, you know, and it's like, pitches it out there, swim bait settles in the water, 10, 15 seconds, he's bringing it back. So I walk up there and I said, here, let me see your rod. I said, you're reeling too fast. I said, oh, stand up. They don't care about your bibs. And I said, you're reeling too fast. So 90% of the people reel these things too fast. You pitch it out there, and here's how fast I want you to reel this reel. Barely moving it, okay? So I took his rod, I pitched it back out, I let it settle for about 15 seconds, I flipped the bail over, and I just slowly turned it, and I was hooked up. Give him back his rod. Here you go. You're too fast. You can run and gun for jumpers, have a great time. You're probably 20, 30 fish a day doing it. Great time. If you don't have a boat like mine that's open in the front, you've got a helm area and you can't walk to the front, come up to that fish and then just turn the boat sideways, okay? When you think you can get that rod over to it. Some guys will fish a longer, whippier rod that they can cast better. The key is how fast you reel that reel. That's gonna make a difference, okay? I've had guys right beside me running and gunning. We were running and gunning, we were catching fish. They weren't. And it was a good friend, and he called me on the radio and I said, you're reeling them too fast. Slow, slow, slow down. And then they started catching fish. And it's like, wow. It's like, yeah. It's amazing just moving the handle slightly. You put that swim bait down in the water and just barely turn the crank, and he's swimming. He looks good. Okay? Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. If you're out there and you're dead in the water, pitch a swim bait out from the boat and put it up in a rocket launcher in a rod holder somewhere. It's working out there. It's just bobbing away. And, you know, you might look up and the rod's over. You know, because most of the time you got a little bit of drift going. It'll be out away from the boat. So most of the time you won't tangle it up. So if you're trolling them, that hook needs to be dead center where it comes out at. If you're running a gun of swim baits, no, just get it on there. Doesn't matter. Just get that swim bait on there, okay? It doesn't have to be dead center. Trolling, it does. It won't troll straight if you don't get it dead center. So if you're trolling, put them back 75 feet to about 100 feet behind the boat. Slow down a little bit. Like I said, you can troll them 7 miles an hour, but pretty soon you're going to beat the tails off, and then they're not going to work any good. So it's like somebody took a bite out of that tail. All right. This is a squid Trex from Nomad. Those are fairly new out. You can jig them, you can troll them. The real big guys, you can fish halibut or bottom fish. They're pretty universal in what you can fish for. I would change the hooks on them to a little bit bigger hooks. They do lose fish on the hooks. They lose halibut and albacore on that size hooks. They need to have a little bit bigger hooks. Just take the hooks out and put new Gamakatsu assist hooks on them, 2-aught. So. Yeah, the 2-aught 510 assist hooks. Swap them out.
You can buy the 510s already pre-tied, or do you have to buy them?
You can buy them pre-tied.
Okay.
Yeah,
For a wire fit.
yeah. I've bought them both ways.
It's the backwards barb on it, right? The barb from the outside.
It's an out barb, yes. Yeah, and the out barb on a Gamakatsu. What he's talking about, the barb's on the outside. Okay. Doesn't make a bit of difference. I've had plenty of them stuck in me. They don't come out.
But they don't shape your mono, at least your fluoro.
What's that?
They don't shape your fluoro.
No, they don't. So yeah, but so yeah. So let's see, 175 to 150 feet back, 1.5 to 7, or running a gun for jumpers. Retrieve needs to be slow. And then drifting swim baits while you're working the iron or live bait. So, how many of you have fished swim baits? Anybody? Okay. How many of you fished iron?
Not well.
Not well. Okay. Iron has gotten complicated in the last couple of years. We have slow pitch iron. We have fast pitch iron. We have yo-yo iron. We've got high pitch iron. Holy crap, how can you keep track of all that? It's what do I need to catch fish with? So I'm going to simplify it all for you, okay? I like to keep things simple. From the time I had all that gear on my boat, I have one bag on my boat, and then I have my iron bag. And that one bag holds everything I'm going to fish with on that boat for albacore, other than my jig bag for my iron. That's all I have on the boat. I went from all that gear to whoop. So most people make it way too complicated. Right now, working the iron, they got that really complicated, okay? And everybody seems to come out with another piece of iron. Gamakatsu came out with their, I forget what they called it, C-Force or iron or some darn thing. And they were kind of slow to the game and it didn't go. And, so you have high-speed jigging, also known as yo-yo jigging, okay? This was the first thing that, back when Shimano brought out the butterfly jig, that jig had been around for a long time already, years ago, but we just people drifted away from it. Well, then they came out with a new rod and reel technique with it to make it work better. So they reintroduced it back in the early 2000s, about 2006, 2007. They came out with a butterfly jig again, and that rod was a parabolic rod. Most rods fishing yo-yo iron are going to be anywhere from about 5'10" to about 6'2". Okay, they're going to be right in that range by most manufacturers. This is a Daiwa rod. This is a Harrier. No, this is Saltiga. I've got a Harrier over here too. It's got a long butt on it, okay, because most of the time you're going to put it up under your arm, so you need to have enough distance here to get it away from you just a little bit. The rod's parabolic, which means it's softer, but it also is going to load up. And when I say load up and parabolic, this rod is going to literally double. Whoop, back up. See that rod there? See it? I mean, that's literally a horseshoe. Okay? Parabolic rods are going to work all the way through the rod versus work only part of the rod. Okay? So when we work this iron, the whole rod's working. Okay? And when you hook a fish, this rod shuts off clear down in here. If that rod shut off out there, your back would be really feeling at the end of the day, because that fish has got more leverage on you when the rod shuts off out here versus it shutting off close to you. Okay? I mean, you think you're going to blow this rod up, and we've had those rods just doubled over. Nope, not going to happen. Never happened. Never broke a rod on a fish. So high-speed jigging, also yo-yo jigging. Okay? So if you hear the phrase, they're the same thing. High-speed jigging is what we had with butterfly jigging when they first come out. So up under the arm, we've got a lure that's shaped like one of these guys, flat. Okay? And this is not a high-speed jig on the end of this, but the rod's parabolic. So as I dip this rod, let me get that lure off there so I don't whip it around. Get a hold of it. All right, high-speed jigging is going to be in action from about a 45 angle here to about right there, and you're going to do it a little bit faster than that. Okay, so when we first started doing it, we were just whipping the tar out of it, and we were adding reeling to it. Okay, and it worked. We caught fish, but geez, you'd be worn out just from jigging, let alone catching fish. Okay, well, the lures changed a little. That helped. And then we learned that they don't always want that fast retrieve. Remember I told you when we drove those spots and I'd have Weddy drop and retrieve at one speed, Megan drop and retrieve at another speed. Well, you know, this isn't near as bad.
Will the jig actually fall as fast as the rod is going down?
Yeah, most of the time. But we'd slow, sometimes it'd be just like this. Okay. Well, when you're moving at that speed, it doesn't matter if you have a parabolic rod, because now you're not really moving fast enough to really do much. So, but when you're moving a little faster, this rod, if you were to film it and slow it down, you'd see the rod whipping up and whipping down. And the lure's jigging down, and when the lure drops, it'll go flat and be wiggling. And when you bring it, on the up pull, it's going to come up and dart. Okay? Which is why the hooks are normally on the top of the lure, is because as it darts, they're going to take it from the direction it's coming. Okay? And when you drop it, it's going to go down and it's going to dart. And normally on the yo-yo and the high-speed jigging, they don't normally take that on the drop. You hear people talking about that? I'm telling you, that's a bunch of crap. Those people don't fish iron as much as we do. because we do not catch fish on the drop on high-speed jigging. It has happened maybe once or twice in 10 years. Okay? Now, slow pitch jigging, yes, they'll take it on the drop. That jig's made to catch fish on the drop. Okay? So we're talking about high-speed yo-yo jigging. Okay? Now, let's talk about.
Hey, Dale.
Hmm.
When you slow down the rod movement, are you slowing down the retrieve crank too, or
Yes.
you are? You're
Yes.
slowing both down.
You're slowing both down. Yeah. I've got the drag backed off so I can do that without it whipping this jig around. You know. But yeah. And I'm telling you, 60-70% of our fish are coming on a slower retrieve. You know, you can do that all day long. You know, I mean, you could do this all day long. You know. So, not a big deal. Fluorocarbon, definitely. Tied straight to a solid ring, okay, which has a split ring hooked to the lure. Okay. What's the number one thing they eat? Midwater shrimp, right? What's the color of this jig? Kind of pink and kind of silvery blue. And I was doing a seminar at the Saltwater Sportsman Show here a few years back, and it was all on iron. There was a panel of us. And I mentioned, and somebody, pink, silver, and blue. And somebody, well, you know, got these other colors. Like, so I opened up their jig bag. They brought their jig bag. 90% of their iron was pink, silver, and blue. It's like, dude, don't tell them other colors. I mean, you're fishing pink, silver, and blue. Your whole bag's pink, silver, and blue. So, my whole bag is pink, silver, and blue. I mean, yeah, there's a few other colors in there, but so how much or how big a jig should I buy? Most of the time, you're not going to fish with 8-foot swells and the wind blowing 20 knots in a tournament. We did a few times. So you're going to fish 110 to 140 grams. Okay? That'll get it done. If you have to fish anything more than 140 grams, the wind's probably blowing. You're drifting too fast. Now you're going to jump up to 160 or 180 grams. If you get above 180, it's not a very fun day. It's just blowing. And that's tough jigging. So, we had a day, one of the Oregon Tuna Classic tournaments, and Tread Barta was out, so we all had to fish. You know, it's like, he's out filming a show with us. We're sitting there at the starting line off Garibaldi, and I had the coordinates where people had caught fish the day before, so that's where we were going to run to, and it was only about 30 miles. Flare went up, gunned it, got going out there, 8-foot swells, quartering them, feathering it to keep from going airborne over the top of them. We get to 30 miles, and we're way past all the other boats. We're way out ahead of them. Get to 30 miles, we put the troll gear out, a couple of rods out, start trolling, look back, oh, it was dirty. The ocean was dirty there overnight, and it's like, we can't catch fish here. And everybody's hunkered down in rain gear because, I mean, the wind's blowing the spray over the side of the boat, and Megan lays on the coffin box. She's kind of sick. Stephen and Anthony are in the back, and Weddy's back there, and I mean, everybody's got their head down. So bring the troll gear back in. I bring the boat barely up on plane, trying not to bounce her off the coffin box. And I went about a mile, and on the sonar, big old line of stuff at about 30 feet. And the water cleared up a little bit. I stopped, didn't say anything, grabbed a jig rod, dropped it down about 30, worked it just a couple of times, hooked up. And when I hollered hooked up, the boat exploded and everybody came to life, and we went to jigging, just working iron. I left the motors running, and the swells were down and up and down and up, and we were down on the trough. And there was times I was gaffing fish above the boat. And we dropped the iron, hooked up. And, you know, and there was a shark in one of the swells that if that had broke, the shark would have just been in the boat. You know, he was up there looking in the boat, and it's like, whew, you know. That's one of them ugly tournament days that I don't fish anymore, those kind of days. But it was iron. That was the only thing we could do. And you can do that in that swell. But we were drifting so fast, I had 180 and 240 grams of iron on these rods. That was a lot. Fortunately, didn't have to drop it very far. Because if we'd had to go very far, it would have had so much scope in the line it wouldn't work. But fortunately, on that first fish, it brought the school up right under the boat, so we could just drop in the water and be hooked up. You know, that was such hard fishing and just conditions. We had 30-some fish, and we decided, oh man, let's get out of here. We got, so we went back in. Really early. We had those fish on before any boat showed up. That's how rough it was for them coming out. And but went back in. We thought we were doing pretty good because we thought, man, as hard as it was for us to get into that and get that going, oh no, we didn't even place. So other people eventually found that spot. So, but 140 grams is pretty common. So slow pitch jigging. Do less to get more. Okay? The difference between slow pitch and regular jigging or yo-yo jigging or high pitch, high jigging is how your lure behaves. Very little movement by the angler, not so tiring. All the actions in the slow pitch jigging rod. It's longer, it's parabolic, 6 to 7 feet. Okay? You're using the same reels. The one thing about this reel, jigging reels are designed specifically for jigging. Okay? This is a Saltiga 35. A Saltiga 30 is wider and not nearly as narrow and not nearly as tall. Okay? A Saltiga 30 will hold almost as much line. But this is narrow, tall, brings 48 inches of line in with every crank. Okay? So in the Saltiga line, they'll have a 15, a 20, 30, 35, 40, 50. The 35 is the only one, and it's the right size for jigging. 44 pounds of drag. I mean, you catch a lot of different fish with this reel. Okay? But, and they also make this in a 2-speed if you want it. So if you want to get serious about catching big stuff. But narrow and tall. In Shimano's reels, those are narrow and tall. They're jig reels. The reels that are made specific for jigging are narrow and tall. There's a lot of guys that try to put, well, that one's over there is about $40 cheaper, I'll put that on, because it still brings in 42 inches of line. It's not the same. Okay? You want to be good at jigging, you need to invest in the right rod and the right reel. Okay? Shimano makes their narrow and tall reel, same size, for jigging. So does Akuma. Okay? All three brands are good at making narrow, tall jig reels. Okay? The slow pitch, that's a slow pitch jig rod. How light that is. Yeah. That's an albacore size rod. It looks like a trout rod. It looks like a crappie rod. Yeah. And it'll double in two as if you had, you know. Yeah. It's parabolic. It's made to put the long butt up under your arm, but it's way more parabolic than this other one. It's also lighter. So when you're buying a rod for albacore for jigging, stay on the lighter side of the rod. it'll work the jig better. Okay? And you're probably not going to bust the rod. I've never busted one on a tuna. As long as you're within the rating. On the Daiwa rods, the medium heavy is typically what I fish on their jig rods. If you go to a little bit heavier than that, it's not going to work the jig nearly as well as you want it to. You need to be professional level to work that jig if you're going to fish a heavier rod. If you fish a lighter rod, it's more forgiving for the novice or the beginner. Okay, remember that. Stay on the lighter side. All right, slow pitch. The shape of the jig, see how it's more asymmetrical? Most of the time they'll have hooks up here on the top, hooks on the bottom. These are the Saltiga, Daiwa Saltiga SK jigs. Pink silver, blue, pink silver. The sardine. They come with hooks on the bottom. I add the hooks to the top. The assist hooks. Okay. In the Shimano jigs, here's their slow pitch. Okay. Here's the butterfly jig they came out with that we started whacking fish with a long time ago. Then they went to this guy, the flat fall, which we worked at yo-yo jigging style. And then they came up with a slow pitch. Okay? So slow pitch with that rod. Same reel. Here's the action. Again, you're down here at about a 45, and you're going to real quick to vertical, and at the same time, about half a crank. It's going to cause that jig to dart up and go sideways, and you're going to wait. 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004, 1005. Boom, and then you're going to drop it. At another half crank. Okay? And you're going to count 1001, 1000, up to 5 again. You need to give it time to be horizontal. Okay? Because it's going to act like a wounded bait fish, and that's when they're going to take it. The reason the hooks are on both ends is because when you drop it, the bottom of the lure is going to become vertical or horizontal and moving, and they're going to pick it up from the moving side. When you jerk it up, it's going to come up, and the leading edge is going to be horizontal, and they're going to take it from that side. Okay? You don't have to have 2 hooks on each end. You can get away with 1. So 4 hooks on that is a lot of hooks. That's a lot of hooks when you've got that fish over on the gaff and he's bouncing around, you know. So you got 3 hooks there that you got to watch out for. So that is a slow pitch jig. These are the Nomad Buffalo jigs, which I really like. This guy right here is the one I have on here. And this guy he's not only shaped this way, but he's a little bit, you can see he bulges out right there at an angle where he is not on this side. They're asymmetrical. So that way they will flutter and create, you know, erratic action is the main thing about them. So same size weights, about the 110 to 140 grams. Okay. When you put this jig together, you're going to put a split ring on him, and I'd buy the owner split rings. They're the best split rings out there. Nomad, I believe, makes split rings as well, packages them up. But the 5.5 to 6 is the size split ring you want. And then you're going to put a solid ring on top of that, and that's going to be a 5.5 to a 6 and a solid ring as well. Okay? Buy them early in the season before the season because they're hard to come by during the season. And then put your assist hook on top of that. And again, I prefer the Gamakatsu 510 model assist hook. So you can make your own assist hooks if you want. Go buy some 400-pound parachute cord. Buy the Gamakatsu 510 hooks, bulk, and cut that to 9 inches, the whole thing to 9 inches. Forget trying to cut that with a pair of scissors, it's not going to happen. That's Kevlar. Cut it with a pair of pliers, tie a half hitch, put it on the hook, run it up. You've made a loop out of it, so put the loop right through there, pull it up tight. Cut yourself a 1-inch piece of 3/16 automotive shrink tubing for wiring. Slide it on there, heat it up. It'll shrink down. That half inch will never give. It'll work great. Okay? That's a way for you to make your own if you want. So I did it one year. Just Gamakatsu provides my hooks. They're one of my sponsors. But I did it anyway just to learn how to do it. So I can tell you guys how to do it. So, and I used them. I used them for bottom fish and albacore. But
The bottom fish, you ever tie any tinsel in there for like make shrimp?
what's that?
Do you for bottom fish with those jigs? Do you ever tie a tinsel?
You can play around with them and do a lot of different things with them, yeah. But it's interesting. There's very few things that won't take iron. I've taken iron to Panama and caught snapper and grouper on them. It's amazing what will eat iron. Salmon will eat it. If you cast salmon out there offshore, salmon fishing for coho, get a little guy about 45 or 60 grams, pitch, put a 3/0 Siwash hook on him, pitch him out there and let him flutter. Oh yeah, it's amazing. All right, let's see. All right, any questions on iron? You got the iron down?
So you put the assist hook on the solid ring. Is that what you're doing at the top there?
Yeah, up on the solid ring.
Got it.
Yeah. You don't want it on the split ring. So remember, you want to be fluorocarbon to it. You don't have to have this much fluorocarbon. I'm sponsored by Seagar, so I run quite a bit. But, and you catch a few fish, check this right here to see if it's frayed. If it's frayed, cut it off, retie it. Because it will get frayed. Okay? Most time the lure's not going to be in their mouth, the lure's going to be hanging beside their mouth, and they're going to be hooked with the lure or with the hook, but the lure's going to be hanging outside their mouth, you know, like this. But during all that process, they could still fray that. Now, absolutely do not out there fishing and leave your jig just hanging overboard. You know what's going to happen? Shark's going to come along and he's going to open his mouth and he's going to just close his mouth on that and he's just going to be swimming around with it, and you're going to notice that, oh, my lure, oh, what's going, and come up tight on it, and you're going to try to get it back. He's going to roll on it, and when he rolls on your leader, he's either going to snap you off or he's going to fray 8 feet of your fluorocarbon. So here's what you're going to have to do. Run the drag up tight, yard him back to you. You're either going to break him off or you're going to get him to you and reach down with the pliers and pop it out real quick. If you screw around with him very long, he's going to roll on you. Don't mess with him very long. He'll roll on you. And when he does, forget it. It's all over. He's going to be swimming away with your jig. You only have one shot of getting that jig back. And it's real fast, real tight on the drag, horsing him back. So you can fish heavier fluorocarbon on iron. You can jump up to 40 pound. Okay, it's a reactionary strike. It's not a bait type thing that they're going to swim by and look at it. You know, they're going to be darting and boom, taking it. Any questions on iron? Whoop. I'm going to have to speed up. All right. Live bait. Anchovies, most common thing we have. Most of the time we're fishing 1/0, 1 or 2 size hooks. Okay? Most of the time that's 2. 30 to 40 pound fluorocarbon. There's 9 methods to hook a live bait. You can collar hook them in the side here, hook them through the nose. If you hook them through the nose, don't hook them from the bottom coming up because you'll pin their mouth shut, they'll suffocate. Okay? Hook them sideways through the nose. So that way they can still swim and live. Get the bait to dive. You know, they used to say hook the guy in the back here, to get it, tilt him to get him to go down. And well, not on an anchovy. Forget that. You screw around with that all day long. Just put one of these guys on there. Okay? About 3/8 ounces. You don't want to drag him down. You just want to coax him down gently. Okay? Put that about 3 feet up the line to get him to go down. You need to have some of those on board. Casting or fly lining the bait overboard, just come back here. Put my glasses back on to get that. All right. So you want to peel off a little bit of line like this, even more than that. Your bait's hooked on it. And basically you're going to get him, just kind of lob him, getting him going, and just kind of lob him out there. And with your reel and free spool, just gently lob him out away from the boat. You don't want to whip him out there because you'll probably whip him right off that hook. But that's a pretty small reel. That's a Saltiga 20. So in the Saltiga line, Saltiga's their high-end line. That has 44 pounds of drag as well. So, but and this is a Saltiga Proteus rod by Daiwa. So really nice rods, nice and soft on the tip. But so yeah, fluorocarbon straight to the live bait hook with a ring on it, and you can see the knot up there. I've got, I don't know, 6 feet of fluorocarbon on that. So 30 pound. Your live well should fill in 8 seconds. If your live well fills in 7 seconds, they're okay. They're going to swim a little harder. Anchovies, of all the bait fish I've ever seen, are the hardest to keep alive. If there's a way to kill them, they'll die easily. If it fills in 9 minutes, they're okay. They're just not going to have as much oxygen. And at the end of the day, you're going to lose a lot of them. So too fast, they swim too hard. Too slow, they die from oxygen. So a good live well will adjust from the outflow. Okay? And we'll have multiple ports of entry. So that way you've got flow all the way up and down at every level of that live well. Okay? And we'll have outflow at multiple levels of outflow. I have a Kodiak live well in my boat. That thing, I've had 7 scoops in, it's 50 gallons. I've had 7 scoops in it. And look down there and they're all just swimming in a circle, in an oval. But it does really well. So, all right. There's a light in my live well, kind of helps calm them down. Paint it light blue, kind of about this color, soothing to them. Have an oval shape for sure. Clear lid in the top. So, and then don't run too hard and kill all your bait trying to get out there. And why spend all that money on the bait and then kill half of them trying to get out there on a rough ocean? Slow down, take your time, okay? And then when you're out there fishing, if there's other boats, if there's another boat dead in the water and you clearly see they're dead in the water, best thing you can do, get upwind of them in their chum trail and start fishing. Eventually you'll come drifting right through where they're at, okay? But don't get more than, I wouldn't get more than 300 or 400 yards. Wouldn't get any closer than that unless they invite you. So, chumming. Live bait's probably the best chum. That chopped up the food grade calamari I used was probably the best non-live bait I've ever used. But Frisky's dry cat food, some people have used that over the years. It works. it'll get messy in a wet floor of a boat. Commercial chum works, but it has blood in it. Sharks are going to show up. You don't want them to show up any sooner than they have to. So, and then your dead bait. Dead bait frozen. If you want it to sink, put it in a small bag, put some salt in there, get it salted, it'll sink with salt. So, and then popcorn. Again, guys out there experimenting with all different kinds of things. The popcorn hits the water, the birds are on the popcorn, the fish come up to see what the heck the birds are doing. A little trickery. Taking care of the catch, don't keep any more than you really handle. Figure out how many you want, stop at that. So, I can tell you that having large quotas isn't always the best thing, but and then you can leave your fish on ice overnight if you want. They're going to climb to 85 degrees in the heat of the battle. So you get them on board, they're going to be warmer than the water they came out of. So the first thing you want to do is you want to get them bled. Don't gaff them, bring them overboard, and drop them on the floor, because now you got to chase them. Okay? And that's part of the reason I also don't like to net them, because I got to fish them out of the net. I had a buddy say, "Why are you netting them?" He goes, "Well, it's because my boat doesn't get so bloody." I've seen pictures of his boat, it's just bloody as mine. It's like, heck with that. Gaff those things, try to gaff them in the head if you can. When you pull them over the boat, take that fish all the way to your bleed bucket, keep them on the gaff, take the hook off of them, still on the gaff, cut them either behind the pectoral fin or up in the gills or below the throat. Now take the tail and flip him with his head down so he'll bleed out. Don't use a slurry to bleed him in. You ever had a bloody nose? You put ice on it, right, to get it to stop? Well, that's the same thing you're going to do to that tuna. You want him to bleed out. You don't want to chill him down yet. Let him bleed out, then chill him down. Let him bleed out for 10, 15 minutes in that bleed bucket, and now put him on ice or in a slurry. I use one big handful of salt for about every 4 or 5 bags of ice, those 7 or 10 pound bags, and then fill it up with water after that. If you leave them on that overnight, that'll be so hard you'll have to chip to break through to get to those fish, and you won't be able to put your hand in there to pull the fish out. You'll have to use a hook or a gaff hook or something to get them out of there. So.
You ever tried spiking them after you gill them and spike them?
I haven't, partly because there's so much going on the boat. That's just one more thing to add to the element.
Yep.
Now, with albacore, I don't care about spiking them. Bluefin tuna, yes, that's a different story. So, you want to stop the bluefin from shaking.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and then put them in fish kill bags. Coolers are fine, but if you have coolers on your boat, make sure they're strapped to the sides of the boat or anchored down. Because if you get in a sloppy ocean, you're coming back, and you have 3 coolers that slide to one side, that could cause you to list or maybe roll, okay? Especially if you're in a smaller aluminum boat or smaller boat, so, okay? All right, we've run out of time. Any questions?
Only question I have is why don't you use swivel?
For tying my fluorocarbon, I just like that nice clean connection.
Double.
I use a double Albright. Yeah. A lot of guys use a lot of different knots. I have friends that use uni knot. Uni knot's big, herky knot. Double Albright, nice and flat. Oh, we won't use this rod. I've got too much fluorocarbon to find it. Let's see. This one's been on and off here so many times, it's a little frayed, but see how nice and flat and smooth that is? I mean, it's a little frayed on this end where the tag, that's just the tag that's frayed.
Goes through the eyes nice, and it doesn't grab other lines
Yeah. The only time this is going to fail on you is because you didn't get it tight. And when I tie this knot, you want to work it, work it, work it down tight, work it down tight, you know, and get it nice and, I mean, it needs to be that flat, that smooth, and that tight, and it won't fail on you. Okay? You might break a line, but it won't be there. So that's a double Albright. Sometimes called an improved Albright. Okay?
Have you ever used the John Collins Royal Flyers RP knot?
I have not. I have seen the RP knot, but I haven't used it. So,
How leader shy?
what's that?
How leader shy or albacore?
Swim baits, they're a little bit leader shy. Iron, they're a little bit leader shy. Live bait, they're a little bit leader shy. But with swim baits, you can see I don't have an awful lot of fluorocarbon on this. There's only 4 feet. But, so. Let's talk real quick about bluefin, and then I'll quit. As I told you, in 2009, the biomass on bluefin was at its lowest it's been in 75 years. It took them until 2016 to get the treaty signed between Mexico, Taiwan, Japan, South Korea, but Japan was the biggest influence on that. And since they're no longer seining them, those 1 and 2 year old fish are now coming across, and they're living till they're about 5 years old here before they go back. Okay? That's why Southern California has had such a big fishery take off on them, and it's going to get bigger. Those fish are going to continue to get bigger. You probably won't see 400 and 500 pound bluefin, Pacific bluefin, because they'll migrate back when they're 5 year old fish, and a 5 year old fish is about 400 pounds. So the average size fish caught in Southern California or on the West Coast is about 130 pounds. That's average. 4 feet, 11 inches long, 130 pounds. Guys out of the Bay Area, off Bodega Bay, Fort Bragg in that area, I know of 2 boats down there last year. One boat caught 44 fish. Another boat caught 20. They're trolling a rod like this. This is a Daiwa Proteus rod. It's 7'4". This is a rail rod. Rail rods are made very specific to handle so they don't get torn up on the rail when you've got this down on the rail. Okay? A regular rod, you're going to tear it up using it as a rail rod because it's not designed to handle being on the rail. Okay? This is a Mad Max 200. I've taken that trail hook and put a 5/0 treble hook on it. That's what they typically prefer to do. And I've got a wind-on leader. I've got 80-pound braid on here, 1,500 yards of it. And I've got I cut the leader short for showing purposes. But you want anywhere, at least 30 feet of fluorocarbon. Okay? 30 to 100 feet fluorocarbon. And this is 130-pound fluorocarbon. Okay? If you don't know how to make your own, you can buy them. And R&R out of Southern California made my swordfish leaders, and they make all kinds of leaders, wind-ons. And you can go online to them or to Melton's and get them as well. But typically in the Northern California guys are putting these back anywhere from 300 to 1,200 feet behind the boat. Okay? They make a little line counter that you can strap to the rod. It just hooks to the rod, flip the bail open on it, put it down in. It's a little electronic guy with a battery in it, made by Rapala. I don't have one with me, or I'd show you how to. But as you're letting line out, it just keeps track of it. It can be off just a little bit, 20, 30, 50 yards. You don't care if it's off that much when you're out 900 feet. But get them behind the boat and troll them anywhere from 7 to 10 miles an hour. Okay? And when you get the lines out, take the line counter off. So, you know, it's made only for letting line out. So put it on the other rod to let the other rod, or however many rods you have. And troll them You hook up, you fight that fish, get him up beside the boat. Even a 130-pound bluefin is dangerous beside the boat if you don't know what you're doing. Break your arm, hands, fingers, okay? You want to get at least a 8-foot gaff so that way you can get down or out away from the boat a little bit and gaff them. And a big tuna, any big tuna, gaff him under the chin, lift his head slightly, he'll stop fighting. He'll just literally just stop. You know, some of you know that we fish the East Coast for the giants a lot. You get them gaffed under the chin, you lift their head slightly, they just stop. You can do anything you want with them. That's how we get the hooks out of them and tag them. So get the gaff in him, raise his head, then get another gaff in him, 2 people on him, get that up, and then pull him over the rail. And when he hits the deck, he's going to go to flopping. And when he does, you're going to be careful because you got these hooks that could get you, okay? At that point, you can brain spike him, and that's one of the things they try to do. But they take a handsaw and they cut a V shape in the back, okay, down to about the vertebrae. And then they run 400-pound mono right down that spine, about a 4-foot section of it, and that'll stop him from quivering, okay? They also take and either gut them through the belly. East Coast ones, when we're catching the really big ones, they'll cut the gill plate out and reach inside and gut them from the inside and then stuff them full of ice. So you're going to start seeing more and more of these bluefin coming up here because of management practices, and they're doing a pretty good job with them. We've seen the numbers on the East Coast climb dramatically because of it. So, any questions?
Bluefin in the albacore territory?
What's that?
Bluefin in the albacore territory?
Yeah. No questions on that? Got that dialed in? All right. Any questions on the albacore? Question?
Have you done much topwater stuff with albacore?
Played with it a little bit. I mean, they will hit poppers and different stuff.
We had some fun with it last year. Didn't know if you had certain advice of when to hit it.
Yeah. Sometimes it gets going so hot and heavy, you forget to pull something out and play with it. But yeah. So, all right. No more questions?
On your
You-
twisting rods where you're working the iron, what size mainline are you running?
On the iron rods,
Yes.
50 and 65-pound braid.
Okay. Still pretty light.
Yeah. So, any more?
From July, August, on to September, is there a better time for converting the bite? Or is it, do you just try to convert all the way through?
No, we always try to convert, but yeah. So, there are times late in the season when it seems like the bite's more of an afternoon bite. That is one thing I'll mention is like, if you've heard it's an afternoon bite, why get up at dark 30 and go roaring out there? I saw that happen one year. Weddy was going to come down and fish with us, but she had to fly back in. She'd been visiting her parents, and so we waited. And it was a charity trip, and the bite had been kicking in at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It's like, we're not leaving till 11. 90% of the fleet was gone out of the port first thing in the morning. And she showed up, and we went and had a bite of lunch, and we got our live bait and left, and we got out there noon, 12:30, and there was a lot of boats. I mean, a lot of boats. Everybody was on the radio complaining about not catching fish, and by 3 o'clock, 90% of the boats were gone. At 3:30, the bite kicked in. There was only 4 of us there, and we plugged the boat in an hour and came in. And one of the boats left about when we did, and the other 2 stayed, and they were trying to get quite a few. But we came in, and the chat forum on Monday morning was, "Oh man, that's horrible fishing." It's like, I don't know what you're talking about. So, you need to remember to fish smart, and part of fishing smart is if you've heard all week it's an afternoon bite, why are you leaving at dark 30? And there's a lot of times later in the season, it's more of an afternoon bite. So pay attention to that, and don't kill yourself off spending a whole day on the water when you don't have to be out there until 2 o'clock. So